The Philadelphia 76ers with some surprising pieces this season as talks around trades are coming about. There's players on this team that have made their mark and looking to stay in the city of brotherly love.
You are Locked On 76ers, your daily Philadelphia 76ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 76ers with your host, Pompey and Kayla Santiago with you each and every day. We're going to touch on a lot of things. What players will stay in Philadelphia in terms of the trades? Now, anything can happen, but we look at players that have made their mark and surprised us a little bit throughout the season. KJ Martin, we're going to go over his impact along with Kelly Oubre Jr., in addition to who will be that fifth starter once this rotation starts to get a little bit more clear with the big three. And today's episode is sponsored by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So we're going to start things off with KJ Martin. He strung together some really good past two games, especially against the Bulls. And you also look at the game against the Magic as well. So for KJ Martin, having some season highs with 20 points against the Magic, the big thing I look at him, and Keith, we've touched on the impact of players and the depth that's needed for this team to make a run once everybody is healthy. We were saying, okay, maybe he's going to be a player the Sixers look to kind of shop off once trade deadline comes about. Now, things can still happen, but KJ Martin making his mark, stepping up, and I think, to me at least, he's been quite a surprise. On the side of you, Keith, what are you seeing from your angle, what he's been able to do and the impact that he's left, being able to come off the bench, and even if he's needed to be in the starting lineup at times?
Yeah, like before we talk about that, let's talk about this. Like, a lot of people are talking about trades. I think it's too early for the 76ers to focus on the trade. I mean, they only played one full game with the big three. So you really don't know what you have yet. KJ Martin is a guy, when he signed a 2-year, $16 million contract. Initially, the thought was, KJ has a really, and it's a 2-year deal, but only the first year is guaranteed. So that's the type of contract that makes it extremely tradable for you to be able to go out there and ship this guy to another team and try to, say like, okay, we can just move it. But right about now, when you're looking at KJ, you look at the 76ers, this team is old. They picked up a lot of guys. No offense to Eric Gordon. No offense to Reggie Jackson. No offense to Kyle Lowry. But and no offense to Caleb Martin, who's not old, but he's been extremely injured. You start playing KJ. KJ has been one of the most consistent guys as of late in regards to shooting percentage, in regards to protecting the rim, running the floor. And he's proven to be an asset that I wouldn't trade. I mean, really, I wouldn't, because what you have is with this guy, when you ask me, what do I see with him? He's a guy that can play small ball center. He's a guy who, even though he's only 6'6", he's a power forward, but also he can guard the perimeter. He's also a guy, when you have staggered lineups, he plays well with Tyrese Maxey in the 2-man game. So, we're talking about last year, he averaged 3.7 points in 58 games. And right now he's dropping 20, he's dropping 18. He's getting, he's averaging like 8 points. You don't trade a guy like this because he has so much value with this team. And also, I have to say, I get the rumors, I get all this other stuff. But if you're the 76ers, you have to wait to see what you have. And it's too early to do that, because Joel hasn't played. But KJ, you definitely don't get rid of this guy because he brings a lot to this rotation.
And I think it all circles back to the play of Joel Embiid, and this is something we really harped on in the last episode that we had here on Locked On 76ers, is if Joel Embiid for some reason needs to be shut down or it's going to be inconsistent play, then do you go for a higher caliber player that you can look at? Because right now, once again, it's really early. There's just rumors going around right now, some talks. Of course, Jimmy Butler's in that conversation. I think at this point, the Sixers ship has sailed with him. I don't think that he's going to be any type of look that they look at. But then you look at Brandon Ingram, the Nets also in conversations, Cam Johnson possibly up for grabs. But you look at situations like this where you say, okay, you really can't tell anything. And I'm in agreement with you in that situation where you don't know until you know about Joel Embiid, until this big three has played enough games together. But I think year after year, the biggest thing with the Philadelphia 76ers, it's not only about their star play, it's what they can add off the bench, those hustle guys, those players that can come in and have meaningful minutes. That's something they've really missed throughout the playoffs, throughout the postseason, and it has really hurt them. And year after year, it's okay, well, let them make a trade, see what can happen, and then you have half a season to really get that unit together before you make a postseason push. If I'm the Philadelphia 76ers, once again, this depends on the health of Joel Embiid. I'm in no rush to ship off a guy like KJ Martin. We're going to talk about others too, but this is a situation where we're not saying KJ Martin is going to get a crazy amount of minutes come postseason or he's going to have the biggest impact of them all. It's saying he's making the most of his minutes. And that's just something we really haven't seen in previous years from some of those role players coming off the bench and being able to step in and do what they need to do. And KJ Martin has shown that he can probably do that a little bit early on, especially as of late.
Yeah, and like the thing about the whole trade thing, like the guys you mentioned, Jimmy Butler, Brandon Ingram, I mean, that ship sailed. I mean,
Yeah. Oh,
the
wave
thing
sailed.
is
Yeah.
like, here's the thing. The 76ers, they have a first round pick this year, but is a protected top 6 pick. They're probably not going to get it, especially if they want to win, right? So, and then you look at it of value. You're not trading Jimmy Butler for KJ Martin. Like, you're basically, they're going to want somebody of value for Jimmy Butler. So that's the reason why the Sixers haven't been mentioned in any of these trade discussions, is because they don't have what these teams want for these players. They just don't. They're out of the market. And then also, like you said, the ship has sailed. It's one of those things where you look at it and you say to yourself, okay, so I'm going to get rid of this bench. I got Joel Embiid, who has a messed up knee. I have Paul George, who has a messed up knee, right? And then I'm going to get rid of some of these role players, and I'm going to bring Jimmy Butler, who has a crazy health history too. So I got the all injured team, so to speak. That's not going to work. Now, the one thing that I will say, now KJ stock has risen. Now let's look at his last 5 games, right? We're
Yeah.
going to go on November the 30th, right? He had 19 points on 7 for 8 shooting. And then on the December the 3rd, he had 9 points on 3 for 8 shooting. Some people might say, oh, that was a bad game, right? So then the next night against Orlando, he had 11 points on 5 for 9 shooting. And then on Friday against Orlando, he had 20 points on 9 for 10. And then this is the big key. When Joel Embiid comes back, when he doesn't get any more like touches and stuff like that, he played 18 minutes. He had 6 points on 3 for 3 shooting. He had 3 rebounds, right? And he had a block. Now, again, to some people, that may not say a lot, but to me, that means he was efficient. He was a pretty good role player, and he still played his role. He did that in 18 minutes, which was the fewest minutes he played during that stretch. But I'm here to tell you, like, I am not trading him for anything. I mean, it would have to be another elite role player for me to say to get him, just because this guy continues to step up and does what he has to do for the Sixers.
Right. And then in that situation, you're kind of just trading KJ Martin for essentially another player that's going to make that same impact. But then you have to kind of go to square one and see how that player fits in with the team in the second half of the season as we gear up for the playoffs. So I look at KJ Martin too. The other thing is, Keith, we talked about this way early in the season, even during preseason, in that Magic game too, 1 for 2 from beyond 3-point land. Now, clearly, not necessarily shooting at a super high clip. He doesn't take too much, but the one biggest thing we said is if you can put him in the corner and he can knock down some threes, that's also a way that he can elevate his game. So far, he's been able to do that a little bit more consistently at this point of the season. So you look at it now, it's not only what he can do in terms of in the paint and that game, if he's in there, if it's with Yabu, if it's with Drummond once he comes back, even with Joel Embiid and some of these distant rotations, you can stick him out. And if you can trust in him to make that 3-point shot, that's going to be a big thing. I know people might say here, well, you're talking about KJ Martin. What do you mean he's not tradable? This, that, and the other. I think the biggest thing for me, Keith, going into the postseason for the Philadelphia 76ers, because realistically, that's when we look at when we talk about Joel Embiid, the health and looking forward. It's been the issue, too, of role players and the depth off the bench. Would you say in this situation that this is something the 76ers are going to need in the postseason? When you look at other teams, for example, like the New York Knicks, that have not only their stars, but also other bench players that play their role, that play it well, because to me, the Philadelphia 76ers just haven't had that in previous years.
Yeah, I mean, he is somebody you're going to need. I mean, when we look at this, there are 3 players on this team who turned out to be the most consistent of the role players. Jared McCain, who you can't even say he's a role player anymore, right? Guerschon Yabusele, and KJ Martin. And then the next person would be Ricky Council, but he's a little bit out of rotation. So when we talk about Kyle Lowry, he hasn't really, Kyle has a role. When he does too much, his age comes out, right? Eric Gordon, he has a role. When he does too much, his age comes out. The same thing with Reggie. So when we look at it and you say, like, when you have a big 3, you need guys who can cut to the basket, guys who can hit shots, guys who are gritty and who can defend, and guys who can impact the game without scoring. So when we talk about Eric Gordon, can he impact the game without scoring? No. Right now, you need him to shoot threes. The same thing with Reggie Jackson. You want him to come off the bench and get buckets. If he's not doing that, he's not going to help you. So that's why when you look at a KJ Martin and you look at a Ricky Council, right, they are more, in my opinion, more vital to the 76ers' success than the older guys they have. Because when the older guys right now in their stage of the career, if they're not making shots, they're not helping you. Now, Kyle is a leader. You don't give him a lot of minutes. He gets you in your offensive sets. But that's why I look at KJ as a guy that I'm saying, I got to keep him in there. He also is a pretty good defender. Like, he can guard the perimeter. He can guard, a little bit of the post, depending on who it is, because of his athleticism. That's the reason why I think he's more vital than the other guys.
So our takeaway, too, is it's too early to tell, but it's also important to look at the factors that these rotational players and these bench players are bringing the Philadelphia 76ers, because this is something you need going forward, consistency in that bench play. You might come in for 10 minutes to 18 minutes, but KJ Martin has been able to do a lot with those minutes, especially as of late, and we'll see if he is able to keep it up. Somebody else that I have really been high on, even since a season ago, is Kelly Oubre Jr. He's played a lot of different roles this season. He's had to step up when he needs to, but he's also somebody that can play off the ball and continue to be successful. So we're going to dive into what he's been able to do this season in just a moment and more. And hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return to FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com to get started. If you want to place some bets on Thursday Night Football, make sure you head over to FanDuel today. You can place it on any sport that you would like: NHL, NBA, MLB, NFL, college hoops as well. But right now, if you're looking at some Thursday Night Football, the 49ers -2.5 favorites. That's Thursday at 8:15 p.m. Once again, these odds can change, so make sure you head over to FanDuel right now if you want to lock in that spot. That's America's #1 sportsbook. Be sure to visit FanDuel today to place all of your sports bets. There's no better place than FanDuel to do so. And with big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, You'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it too. Get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month. Go to mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. $45 upfront payment required. New customers on the first 3-month plan only. Speeds slower above 40 gigabytes on the unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. Make sure you go and see Mint Mobile for details. So, Kelly Oubre Jr., let's dive into what he's been able to do this season. He's somebody that I was really high on a season ago, the impact that he was able to have, and he continues to sort of have that early on this year as well. So, looking at some of his numbers, he averages just under 13 points per game, 5.3 rebounds. The biggest thing that I look at, you like to see that field goal percentage go up a little bit, but I look at his steals as well, being able to get those deflections. He had 2 steals in the game against the Magic, 3 steals in the game against the Bulls. Keith, where do you see Kelly Oubre kind of fitting into this picture right now? Do you like what he's been able to do? Do you need more from him? Because last year we saw a lot from him. This year he's played a lot of different roles. How do you evaluate his performance so far on this season and what he can bring to this Philadelphia 76ers squad as that role player?
Well, going back to, let's just say, the first 20 games that he's played, I felt like Kelly has been the one guy who had to do the most sacrificing. He's a guy that really didn't know his role. I mean, we think about this. At one point, Kelly Oubre was playing uh, small forward. Then the next time he was coming off the bench. Then all of a sudden he's playing shooting guard. The 76ers had, I mean, I think they had 14 different starting lineups, right? At least through those first 21 games. I think the last game that we saw is really going to give us an indicator of what Kelly Oubre is going to be. Kelly Oubre looked like Kelly Oubre of old. And what I mean by that is it was kind of sort of like, the 76ers, when they get in that 2-man game, and this is the thing that really messed Tobias Harris up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
When they get in that 2-man game, you need someone who's going to be effective at cutting to the basket, right? Doing all the extra things. And that's Kelly Oubre. There was a time when Joel got a double team and Kelly cut to the basket, and guess what? He got an easy bucket. There was another time when Tyrese Maxey was running to the basket, and all of a sudden Kelly just did a beeline and got an alley-oop lob, or then another time somebody missed the basket and he dunked it. That's where Kelly Oubre is going to be extremely impactful on this team. When we look at this team right now, last year with Tobias Harris, him being extremely active enabled Kelly Oubre, in a lot of people's eyes, to supplant Tobias as the third option. That's not going to happen this year, because right now you have Paul George as number 3. You have Jared McCain as number 4. So in order for Kelly to get involved, he's going to have to continue to do those things. Run to the rim in transition, play great defense, and continue to cut and move without the ball to keep himself active. So I feel like, of all the people, a guy who's only going to get around 6 shots a game, because of his activity, he can average moving forward around 10 to 12 points. He's going to be able, his activity, he's going to get like 8 rebounds, 7 to 8 rebounds, like maybe like 3 offensive boards. He's going to get steals. And I think that we're going to see his plus minus rate go up, because that's going to be his role. And that's going to make him, like I said, KJ Martin vital. But Kelly Oubre is probably going to be the most vital role player that they have moving forward.
And it's interesting because when we talk about Kelly Oubre and the roles that he plays and the different things that he's had to do this season, it all really stems back to the playmaking ability and what having on the floor means to this team when you have Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey in there. So when Joel Embiid is in the game, it opens up a lot of different things for a lot of different players. But that doesn't mean in the scoring realm either. That means in the off ball opportunities, being able to move on the floor, being able to be in spots so that Joel Embiid can kick it out and you can make something happen with it. So, how does Joel Embiid being on the floor impact Kelly's game here? Because this is going to be something that for the 76ers, they hope that Joel Embiid consistently stays healthy and is in this game. And I think in this situation, Kelly can become the player that you're talking about if Joel Embiid is on the floor. So how does his impact kind of help Kelly get to that point where we're talking about and how vital he can be for this team, especially going forward as that really key role player?
Well, it impacts it greatly because, Joel Embiid is going to draw some double teams. Now,
Mhm.
it may not be as frequent as they were in the past because you also have Paul George on the floor, but if Joel Embiid continues to have a second quarter like he did the last one, people are going to attack him. Kelly Oubre is weird because he's 6'7", but he looks like he's a smaller guy just because of his athleticism. So how it impacts it is like when I talked about the cutting, he's real. Kelly is a great cutter, and Joel loves looking for people cutting to the basket. So what that's going to do is it's going to free him up to do a lot of things. And I do feel like, before Kelly didn't really know his role. But what Kelly does is he always says, I'm fluid. I'm like water. I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to continue to run. I'm going to continue to be real aggressive. And just by having Joel there, and having Joel, Maxey, and PG on the floor, Kelly Oubre is going to be wide open. There's no one trying to box Kelly out. There's not going to do anything. And he's going to be able to use his athleticism to get to the rim over and over and over again. So, yeah, that helps out. Now, when Joel is on the floor, what are people going to do? Okay, so you got Maxey, you got PG, get a guy on Kelly. Get a guy on Kelly. Well, so that takes away some scoring opportunities. But when Embiid's not on the floor, believe me, he's going to get less plays called for him, less shot attempts, but you're going to see the offensive rebounds go up and the dunks and the putback dunks go up. I mean, I guarantee you he's going to have at least one a game, a putback dunk, just because there's nobody going to box him out. And that's when he's playing with Joel Embiid.
Kelly Oubre making it look flashy up there with those putback dunks. But once again, he's somebody, when the Sixers were able to acquire him, I was really excited of what he can bring to this team. And I think that ceiling that we're talking about that he can get to is going to be really vital because once again, you are going to need somebody like that. And I know we talk about the stars and what they need to do, and this team is not going to get anywhere without their big three playing together. But at the same time, you need those other guys that are going to do those little things for you because that can be the difference of beating those teams in the East come playoff time in the postseason. And for the 76ers, once again, to dig themselves out of this hole and have this crucial month of December ahead of them. But there's also a lot of other players that have made impacts, so much make it tough for Nick Nurse to be able to figure out the starting lineup. So we look at the fifth starter. Will it be McCain? Will it be Yabu? Can it change depending on matchup? Well, we're going to give our thoughts in just a moment on the other side. And talking about the Sixers and all the action going on in the NBA, there is no better feeling than being able to see it live in the stadium, get the reaction, see the players, see the fans, everything in between. If you like going to live games and live events and having this opportunity, the atmosphere of the crowd, you're going to want to go check out Game Time today. We're going to talk on some deals because anytime I go to a game, I'm always looking at Game Time. They have the best deals, the best seats possible, and really the best figuring out of where you want to sit in the stands, whether it's the outside arena, the inside arena, or everything in between. So Steelers at Ravens coming up at M&T Bank Stadium. There's a super deal. The top 1% value, row 5, section 107. All in for $520. Now, if you don't want to spend that much, that's a good deal. If that's where you want to be, you can also look at the upper sideline. That's an amazing deal in the top 5% value. You will not get these deals anywhere else but Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, make an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It is Game Time. All right. So that fifth starter, and I first want to touch on Jared McCain because this is somebody you and I have gone back and forth about. Well, he should be in the starting lineup, which is something I've said because he's playing so well, which you bring up the good counterpoint of, well, what about that spark coming off the bench? What about that scoring coming off the bench? When you look at Jared McCain, it's been a little bit up and down as of late. It's not the same strength that he had starting out the season, but you can still see the pop and the scoring that he's able to provide and really looks to give the 76ers team. Where do you see Jared McCain fitting into this lineup, Keith? Now, I know it can be dependent on the matchups, but do you want to see him going forward if this team is at full strength coming off the bench? Is he somebody you think they need with that spark off the bench? Or do you like him in that starting lineup alongside Tyrese Maxey and Paul George?
I like him coming off the bench. I mean, initially, right now, I think you got to continue to go with that. I know the last game that they played, Yabu, the starting lineup was Embiid, Yabu at the four, Paul George at the three, Kelly at the two, and Maxi at the one. Right. The thing is, Yabu didn't really have a pretty good game. That game, and it got to a point where he was replaced in the starting lineup in the second half by McCain. McCain had a way better game than him. But the thing is, that was one game. He only played 14 minutes. He had 4 points. I'm talking about Yabusele. He on 2 for 5 shooting. He was 0 for 2 on threes. He had 3 rebounds. And he was a minus 11, right? A minus 11. So he really didn't do much. The thing is, though, I like Paul George better at the three um, to start the game off, right? I also like, and I also like Kelly Oubre playing the two because you give a bigger lineup. But I do understand that just because Jared McCain does not start the game doesn't mean he shouldn't receive starter minutes, right? So he could come off, especially when you make your first substitution. You may take Maxi out the game, or you may take somebody else out the game, and you take Yabu out, and then all of a sudden you have a scorer in there. Even if you take Joel out, you have a guy who can come in, initiate the offense, and score. It's just that right now, we talked about it early on, and it could change my opinion, but we talked about it early on where you have two small guards, although they don't want to be considered small, but they're small by NBA standards. And what are they going to do on the defensive end, right? So that's why I feel like I like this. I like the other rotation better, the starter with Yabu, but McCain could come off the bench and still continue to get those starter minutes.
I look at it in this way too, that if you start Jared McCain, opposing teams, it becomes a little bit easier to game plan. And I say that because you're already at a disadvantage coming in with a smaller lineup. Now, once again, this can be game dependent depending on who you're playing, but we've seen it against the Clippers earlier in the season. They're a longer, lengthier, athletic team. And that's something in a situation where you really don't want to start Jared McCain with Tyrese Maxey because that makes your lineup really, really small, especially in between the guard position. So I'm in agreement with you. And it's crazy because the whole time I've been saying, okay, well, Darren McCain needs to start. He deserves starter minutes. And he does deserve starter minutes, and he can still get that. I mean, he might get more minutes than Yabusele in some situations, even though Guerschon is in the starting lineup. I do think that McCain does deserve that, but I think when you look at it, you're at a little bit of a disadvantage if you go into a lot of games with Jaron McCain and Tyrese Maxey and having that small lineup coming right out of the gate. Teams are going to be able to game plan against that. So I'm with you in the sense of starting Guerschon Yabusele. I think those numbers need to get a little bit better. But once again, he's going to have to figure out how to play with Joel Embiid a little bit more consistently. Guerschon is somebody, too, hats off. I love the attitude that he's coming with for the Philadelphia 76ers team. He's been bouncing around everywhere, too. We've talked about Kelly Oubre. I mean, Guerschon has played the 5. He's played the 4. He's been a starter. He's been a bench player. So Yabusele's in a situation, too, where it's like, all right, wherever you need to put me, coach, I can be. And I think you have a little bit more of an advantage if you go in a little bit bigger into some matchups And then, as you alluded to as well, having Jared McCain get those starter minutes because he does deserve them and he can make a big impact and he will make a big impact. But at the same time, you can't go into every matchup with a small lineup because teams are going to be able to have success over that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those things. Like when we look at it, you say to yourself, if I'm starting the game and I got the 2-man game going, and I know that Jared McCain is not going to get the ball initially early on, right? Am I basically wasting it? Am I wasting him? Because, right now he is the fourth option, right? Even with
Right.
him coming off the bench. So what you want to do is, and it could change, but I could see them trying to get Joel Embiid established. Tyrese is going to have the ball. PG is over there stretching the floor. The Yabu is stretching the floor, but they're not going to really, Yabu's not going to get the ball. And then you got Kelly Oubre just running around, trying to be disruptive, crashing the board like we talked about. And then all of a sudden, you go to the bench, you take them out. Well, who are you bringing in? Like, or who's going to get tired? You know what I mean? By playing the entire first quarter. So that's why it makes a lot of sense because, Yabu is a guy that you have to be conscious of him because of his ability to stretch the floor. He's also a big guy, strong guy. But whereas I feel like if I want somebody out there that's not going to take shots, I'd rather it be Yabu as opposed to McCain, if that makes sense to you.
Absolutely. And I think, too, when I look at Jared McCain, it makes me think of Lou Williams, who has won Sixth Man of the Year. And I'm talking Lou Will when he was on the Sixers, backing up Drew Holiday, too, people. He can get those minutes just like Lou Will was able to throughout his career as sixth man, have that same impact. But right now, you don't necessarily want to go into those matchups with an initiating, starting small lineup. We're going to wait and see, though. We'll see if Yabu is able to adjust, if Nick Nurse goes with that lineup in the next games coming up in this month of December. And if Guerschon Yabusele is able to step up to the plate, because we might be having a different conversation if he is not able to. With the Philadelphia 76ers still getting some rest this week, so we're going to see what they're able to get out of practice. And if there's any updates from that as well, once again, their game not playing until Friday. So we will keep breaking down all the action leading up to it and so much more throughout this week on Locked On 76ers. For Keith Pompey, I'm Kayla Santiago saying so long. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next time.